All right, today we're going to dive into something pretty incredible, a 1600-year-old guide for training the mind. It comes from a text called the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. Now, it lays out a system called the Vinaya, and if you're thinking, oh, that's just a bunch of ancient rules, I want you to hold that thought, because this is so much more. It's really this deep, psychological roadmap for finding genuine inner freedom, and we are going to break it all down.
So where do we even start with something so profound? Well, luckily the text itself gives us the key. It says that the real depth of the Vinaya, the whole system, is revealed through what it calls the 5 establishments. Now don't think of these as just 5 random topics. Think of them more like 5 essential pillars. Together, they build this complete, incredibly sturdy architecture for spiritual practice.
Okay, so here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to look at the foundation, why we even have training, and what happens when we stumble. Then we'll get into the real wisdom of the system, which is all about knowing when it's okay to make an exception to the rules. After that, we'll see how the rules can adopt for the whole community and how that community actually functions. And finally, we'll get to the heart of it all, the core message that ties everything together. It's going to be a great journey.
All right, let's dive right into our first section, the foundation. So, really, why do we even need rules or precepts in the first place? The text doesn't get bogged down in a lot of complex dogma. Instead, it gives this really simple, direct, psychological answer. It all comes down to the state of your mind.
So the text basically lays out 2 states of mind. On one hand, you have not free. This is when our actions are, hijacked by our mental afflictions. You know the ones: greed, anger, delusion. But the goal is to get to this other state, free. And that's when we act from a place of real clarity. The whole point of the training of all these precepts is to guide us from that first state to the second. You can think of them like guardrails on a mountain road, just keeping us on the path.
Okay, so if the big goal is this inner freedom, then what's stopping us? What keeps getting in the way? This is where we get to the second part of the foundation, really understanding transgression. And what's so cool here is that the text isn't just a rule book listing all the things you did wrong. No, it's more like a diagnostic tool. It helps us see the inner obstacles, the root causes that lead us to act in ways that aren't free.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The text doesn't just give us a random list of obstacles. It shows how they work together, like a chain reaction. It all starts with something that sounds pretty minor: sloth, indolence, basically just laziness or a lack of effort in doing what's wholesome. But that little crack opens the door for sinfulness to creep in, getting stained by greed, anger, and so on. Once that happens, we start to feel contempt for the training itself, disrespecting it. That, of course, leads to that awful feeling of regret, this persistent, unskillful remorse. And where does that end? In obscuration of knowledge. Our mind gets so troubled and clouded that we just can't see things as they really are. It's an absolutely brilliant psychological map of how we get ourselves stuck.
Okay, but this brings up a really important question, right? Are these rules supposed to be totally rigid and absolute? Well, that's where our second establishment comes in, the wisdom. And this is where the system shows its incredible flexibility. It recognizes that, life is complicated, and sometimes the most skillful, the most compassionate thing to do is to actually make an exception.
This just shows so clearly that these precepts are meant to be tools, not unbreakable dogmatic laws. I mean, just look at that first reason for an exemption. It says you can be exempt if a minor transgression actually leads to an increase in good qualities. How amazing is that? The others are all about deep compassion for real-life situations, like being seriously ill, or when your life is in danger, or even if you're just in a remote place and don't have what you need. It's all about wisdom and context, not just blind rule following. So if one person can get an exemption, what about the whole community? Can the group as a whole make adjustments? Yes. And that brings us to our third establishment, the adaptation. This is all about how the community can formally decide to suspend minor rules for a while if it's for the well-being of the entire group.
And the text gives 5 really strategic reasons why the Sangha, the community, might do this. Maybe it's to stop a huge fight from breaking out and causing a split, or maybe it's to attract new people and make the teachings more welcoming. It could also be to make sure the Dharma, the teachings themselves, are preserved and can grow stronger. And sometimes it's just about plain survival. This isn't about being weak or giving up. It's about smart, pragmatic, and really compassionate leadership.
This leads us perfectly into our fourth establishment, which is all about the community in action. Now, it's called the establishment of karma, but wait, this is super important. It doesn't mean karma in the sense of cause and effect. Here, karma refers to the formal procedures, the meetings, the collective actions that a community takes to make decisions and just function well together.
And this is where the text gets so interesting. to explain how these community procedures actually play out with real people. It gives us 5 psychological profiles, but it doesn't just list them. It uses these fantastic, vivid metaphors to describe the different ways people show up and relate to rules and group decisions. First, we've got the parrot-like person. You know this type, right? They can recite the rulebook word for word. They know the letter of the law perfectly, but they completely miss the spirit, the deeper meaning. They can repeat the words, but they have no idea how to actually apply the principle when a new situation comes up.
Then there's the torch-like person. This person takes one tiny little point and starts a massive forest fire with it. They just keep talking and elaborating and adding their own ideas, and pretty soon, the original point is completely lost in all the smoke and flames of their own words.
After that, we have the lightning flash person. This one is all about inconsistency. Flash, they show up, they say something brilliant, they're totally engaged, and then they're gone. It's this brief, unpredictable burst of participation, but you can't rely on it. It's not steady.
Now, as a total contrast, you have the painted picture person. This is your rock. Super reliable, they follow the procedure exactly as it's written down. They don't add anything, they don't take anything away. They're like a perfect, faithful artist's copy, incredibly precise and dependable.
And that brings us to the ideal, the goal that everyone is aiming for, the good wisdom person. This person, they get it. They understand the spirit of the law, not just the literal words. Because they grasp the core principle, they can skillfully adapt what they say and do to fit any situation, all while achieving the original wholesome goal. This is what the entire practice is aiming for.
So, okay, we've gone on this whole journey, right? From our own inner obstacles all the way to how a community works together. So what's the one single core message that holds this entire beautiful system together? Well, the text doesn't leave us guessing. It makes it crystal clear.
Just let that sink in for a moment. This one sentence changes everything. It tells us that the whole point isn't about punishment. It's not about policing behavior from the outside. The real work, the real path to freedom, is about purifying our own inner motivation. It comes from transforming our intention. What's actually happening in our heart and mind? And really, that's the big takeaway, isn't it? This ancient, sophisticated system, it's not a tool for external control. It's a kind of inner technology for cultivating awareness, for working from the inside out. And that leaves us with a really practical question to take away, a question for our own lives. How does your approach to growth change when you shift your focus away from just following the rules and toward actively, consciously cultivating the intention that lives behind your actions?